And now we will launch into the relationship between Isis, Mary, and Liberty. That's what I want us to understand. So, first of all, the whole movement, the women's spirituality movement, which I think a lot of it in this country was launched by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and friends, was to seek the knowledge and the understanding and the idea that the woman is sacred too. That women and everyday women should be honored and respected and seen as sacred. So, and then in the Christian tradition we had God in the image of man, women forbidden from the priesthood, killed for celebrating the sacred. We know that. We're not going to even go into that right now. And so arising now with this women's movement and civil rights and the suffrage movement and the anti-Great War movement of the 1800s and the 1789 vindication of the rights of women by Mary Wollstonecraft, we have this movement that is happening. It's a long movement. It's a long strided movement. What we've learned, though, is that the goddess, the woman as sacred and the goddess, existed in a really powerful way, and then we lost, that sense of those things. But we didn't lose her ultimately. And one of the things that we did discover was that, for example, the cathedrals are built over sacred wells. They're inspired by the goddess. Every single one of the cathedrals is dedicated to Mary, and many have the Black Madonna statue below in the grotto. And this brings us to two debates. And these are the two major debates that have happened. One is, who is this Black Madonna who appears everywhere? And secondly, who was it who sought to overthrow the overriding control and oppression of the church? Okay, so I just want to look at these two questions because they may not seem related, but they are related. Somebody was seeking to overthrow this oppression, okay, and it is related to the Black Madonna. Okay, so first of all, who is the Black Madonna? So with this women's movement, with this research, it was discovered and pointed out that the Black Madonna is unmistakably Isis. I mean, basically, there's no question about it. The Egyptian Isis. There is also evidence that the craftsmen themselves who were building the cathedrals, the masons, were already aware of that. They already knew that Isis was, that all these cathedrals were being built. They were being built in the name of Mary. But the Black Madonna statues and images were Isis. Okay, so it turns out that these two are totally connected. So in the beginning was, according to this history of the people who were building the cathedrals, there was the Great Mother in the form of Isis. So that was how they were looking at the Great Mother, in the form of Isis. So who is Isis and why is she important? So Patricia Monaghan talks about Isis, and my book actually just opens to the page of Isis. It's completely ripped right down the middle. As I was going to go look up Isis, it just fell open. I've looked at it so many times. Okay, so from the point of view of Patricia Monaghan, Isis is the first daughter of Nut, and Nut, this is Egyptian, and Nut is the overarching sky. You've seen the pictures of Nut, and if you have not been to the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose, yeah, you must go. You absolutely must go.
How do you spell Nut?
N-U-T?
N-U-T?
Or N-U-I-T. Yeah, well, we're going to have probably different spellings of some of the gods and goddesses. So she's the first daughter of Nut, and the father was, and so Nut is the overarching sky. So she's the cosmos, absolutely the cosmos. and the little earth god called Geb, G-E-B. Isis was kind and loving. She taught people how to grind corn, spin flax, weave clothes, and relate to each other in respectful ways. So she lived with her brother, Osiris. And Osiris was the god of the Nile waters and the vegetation. Their brother, Set, was jealous and had his motivations, and he kidnapped and killed Osiris. Isis cut off her hair, tore her robes to shreds, and wailing in grief, set out to find Osiris's body. And all these things happened along the way, just like Demeter when she was looking for Persephone. All these big stories, all the stories take place there.
Dismembered too.
Yes, and he was dismembered. So when she finally finds the body, she realizes it's been totally dismembered. It's cut into 12 pieces. This is tragic, but what Isis does is she finds all the pieces, all the parts of the body except the penis. Okay, so what she did was she substituted the penis, because she never could find it, so she substituted that with a piece of shaped gold. And then during this all the happening of all this, she invented embalming. Okay, so she embalms, which was very big, in Egypt. So she embalms the body, and now she's got this magic gold penis, basically. And so what happens is she invents magic words, and she puts it all back together in the body, embalms it, invents magic words, and mysteriously the god Osiris arises again. So Isis then magically, as a virgin, so here's where the story comes from, as a virgin, because she was living with him as her brother, and she was a virgin. Okay, but as a virgin, through the magic words and the golden phallus, she conceives a child. There's another way that you can conceive, is just get a golden phallus. Okay, so there's two ways. We've learned two ways here. Okay, she conceives the sun god Horus. That's her child. That's the baby at her breast. Okay, and so she's got the sun god Horus who's going to rise up. Eventually, Isis becomes known as the Lady of 10,000 Names, whose true name is Isis. She represents the sun, the moon, the sky, the waters, reproduction, and love. And the critical and the main thing that she offered to her followers was immortality. Okay, so I'm keeping this story about Isis really short because it's a huge story. She was major in the ancient world. Manly Hall is also a person, a Mason, who writes a lot about Isis. Okay, this book is called The Secret Teachings of All Ages, which I highly recommend. And he's got a picture of Isis here as being central to Masonry and to the Masonic path. So those builders of the cathedrals, the Masons, formed guilds, and inside those guilds they were studying the ancient mysteries, as it turns out. And one of the ancient mysteries that they were studying was the mystery of Isis, that had to do with dismembering to remember who we are and going through rites of initiation to come alive. Okay, so here on the picture that Manly Hall provides, it says, I, Isis, am all that has been, that is, or shall be, no mortal man hath ever me unveiled. Being the virgin, quote, the virgin, that was her power, because she was never unveiled. She kept all her power inside and to herself. So virgin wasn't necessarily related to sex as much as it was to power. So this is in the old days. She had her own power. She had her own magic. She had the power of immortal life, which she invented, especially through embalming. Okay, so Manly Hall, in Manly Hall's work, he writes, he writes, I am Isis, mistress of the whole land. I was instructed by Hermes, and with Hermes I invented the writings of the nations, in order that not all should write with the same letters. I gave mankind their laws, and ordained what no one can alter. I am the eldest daughter of Kronos. I am the wife and sister of the king Osiris. I am she who rises in the dog star. I am she who is called the goddess of women. I am she who separated the heaven from the earth. I have pointed out their paths to the stars. I have invented seamanship. I have brought together men and women. I have ordained that the elders shall be beloved by the children. With my brother Osiris, I made an end of cannibalism. I have instructed mankind in the mysteries. I have taught reverence of the divine statues. I have established the temple precincts. I have overthrown the domination of the tyrants. I have caused men to love women. I have made justice more powerful than silver and gold. I have caused truth to be considered beautiful.
What page is that on?
XLV, which would be XLV.
45.
It's on page 45.
And what's the name of the book
It's on
again?
page XLV.
Secret Teachings of All Ages.
Okay. So Manly Hall notes, by the way, and we'll come back to this, that the Egyptian headdresses that you see in all the pictures with the horns and the rays represent, this is just an aside, represent the energies flowing from the body. Okay, just note that for a second. So that's everything flowing out of the body. Isis evolves into Mary, the celestial virgin, with the sun god in her arms. Mary, and Manly Hall talks about this, and talks about the development in Masonry. Mary, the celestial virgin with the sun god in her arms, represents the creative principle, quote, the highest expression of being. And that's what we find in number 3, the principle of creation. The child symbolizes wisdom. The mother symbolizes faith. And this is about the adoration of the sun, S-U-N, the adoration of the sun, a universal deity, universal. So the Great Mother emerges in the form of Isis, and then she becomes Mary. And back to Patricia Monaghan, she says, Christianity denied the possibility of the divine feminine. That eventually, not right in the beginning, but over time, over a period of a couple hundred years, well, definitely by the 7th century, no more divine feminine in terms of the populace, the population. And Mary starts to get oppressed in terms of her own powers. So Christianity denies the possibility of the divine feminine, and so Isis literally goes underground. So now she's under the cathedrals as the Black Madonna, nursing Horus. So she surfaces as Mary, the Virgin Mary, who loses and regains her divine son. But we know what the Virgin Mary is like. She's not sexual, she's not sensual, all of that. The meaning of virgin has changed. But Mary, okay, so it has been established that Mary is not a goddess, or is she? Because long after all the goddesses have been forgotten, the greater proportion, this is a quote from Patricia Monaghan, long after the goddesses have been forgotten, the greater proportion of churches are dedicated to Mary, not her son, interestingly, and she is the one to whom Catholics worldwide prefer to address their prayers. It's Mary. Manly Hall says, Mary, the creative principle, brings forth, and praying brings forth. So evoking her and knowing her, Mary, as in a mystery, brings forth, by whatever name you call her. You can call upon Mary with her 108 names. She's got 108 names, it is said. Our Lady of Sorrow, Lady of the Vessel. What are some of the names? Our Lady of Roses.
Queen of Heaven.
Queen of Heaven.
There's a litany.
The whole litany. 108 names. Really important.
108.
108. Okay, and in Hinduism, the great goddess has 108 names. And do you know, in Hinduism, this is a mala, a Hindu mala, there are 108 beads on the Hindu mala. So you could call upon the goddess with each bead, 108 names of the goddess, or 108 renditions of a mantra to call the goddess. Okay, with the rosary, there are, this is the only rosary, see, that I can see right now. Look at, check this out. Yeah, okay, so this is the only rosary on the altar here. So there are 54 beads, 54 going around here. Okay, so is there a connection? 108 and 54? Okay, very, very interesting, and each one of them has a pathway in. See the pathway in? This is the pathway in on the rosary. And when you look at a mala, a Hindu mala or Tibetan mala, there's also a pathway in. This is a pathway in. So you go in and then you move through the prayers. This one, which is also on the altar, I made this one. This has got an angel, if you will, or a hawk, depending on how you look at it, since it's actually a hawk that looks like an angel. It's got a pathway in. This one's got 108, but they're divided into 10, 5 sets of 10, like the rosary, and it's got two sets, so that you could go around the whole thing, and it's 108. So it's a combination, rosary and mala. Okay, so that has something to do with prayer. Okay, so the Masons building these cathedrals, they were entering into initiatory rites, the mysteries of Isis and Horus, and the mysteries of Mary and Jesus, which in some ways became interchangeable. These are rites of initiation. In one room, they would study the rites of initiation of ancient Egypt. In another room, they would study contemporary Christian rites. And each one would be an initiation. What they were studying was the creative principle of the universe: wisdom, faith, and eternal life. What is the meaning of eternal life? Through these secret initiations. Okay, and in these secret initiations, they would bring the creative principle and immortality, the sense of immortality, into their own bodies. They were seeking this idea, that thou art. And also, they were seeking, so these are men, the Masons are men, and they're seeking their female aspects. She who is all-powerful in the universe, which also the monks, the Tibetan monks, also seek their female aspect. So they're seeking both their maleness and their femaleness. This is part of the initiation and part of the mystery, to be a total human being. A total human, male, female, and part of the all-powerful universe. It was these Masons who masterminded the American Revolution. And they came up with all these principles upon which to base the American Revolution. They wanted to break out of what they felt was tyrannical oppression of religious thought. That was a big piece of it. They wanted freedom of religion. Why? They were the ones, by the way, again, they were the ones who built the cathedrals. They were very dedicated, but they weren't dedicated to Christianity alone. They were dedicated to spirituality and to the power that these cathedrals represented. But underground, there was a lot going on in terms of initiation and the rites that they were studying. Now, they could have been persecuted for this. They were persecuted for this. They were killed for this at various times during the Inquisition and so on. But they continued with it, and freedom of religion became, of course, as we know, one of the key ingredients in the American structure. Or we could call it, if we want to use a Hindu term, we could call it American group karma. Because they were setting this up together, and they wanted this to be part of the Constitution, freedom of religion, that we guarantee freedom of religion. They wanted to break out of economic oppression as well, and we have to remember that at that time, what they were fighting against, there was no separation between church and state, so the church controlled all financial money situations, and during the Inquisition, they transferred basically all of the wealth that existed into the hands of the church. That's part of what was going on as they persecuted people for not being Christian. Okay, so what the Masons wanted to do was they wanted to embrace the power of a new kind of world order. Okay, then enter liberty. Okay, because liberty became the theme. That is another aspect of the group karma, because the American Revolution was based on the idea of liberty. And then after they were successful in the American Revolution, the Masons then masterminded the French Revolution. And that was in 1789, which was also based on the concept of liberty. Liberty, equality, and fraternity. Those were the three battle cries. They felt at the time that they needed an icon to galvanize the people and bring them into a state of this revolution. And what they found was the ancient goddess called Liberty. Okay, so they resurrected her, or resurrected her, and they said Liberty, the goddess Liberty, is going to be our guide. Okay, so they poured Isis and Mary into the goddess Liberty, who was going to be a new guide for a world in which there would be freedom of religion. But we can't get along without the Great Mother. So they contained her in Liberty. And they put the image everywhere. And there's the very famous Delacroix painting. I didn't get it out to show you, but the very famous French painting of Liberty leading the revolution. You've all seen this painting a million times. And it shows the goddess Liberty and all the revolutionaries behind her.
Breasts.
Pardon me?
She has breasts.
Oh, she has breasts. She definitely has breasts. She has breasts. Okay, so Liberty, they found the Roman goddess called Libertas. The Roman goddess, she's the goddess of freedom, and she bears a torch and a tablet invoking the law. So our Statue of Liberty was first proposed by a Mason, a French Mason. His name is de La Boulaye, Edouard René de La Boulaye. And he was a staunch abolitionist. He proposed the idea that liberty should be given from the French, the goddess Liberty should be given from the French to the Americans to celebrate success in both of those revolutions. He proposed this at a gathering of Masons in a suburb of Paris in 1865. And they were all in agreement, and they said, yes, liberty, that's what it's all about. That's what we need to give to the Americans, our partners. So the French and the Americans were partners in the freedom of religion, but also retaining the great goddess, the great mother. So he said, and as they talked about it, how are we going to represent this? Okay, and he was an artist. He was an artist, and he came up with the design. She would have 7 rays coming out of her head, her crown, Liberty. And these 7 rays would represent the sun. She would be the sun. She would contain the sun. So it wouldn't just be that she would be nurturing that child who is the sun. She was going to be the sun. She was going to be all powerful. The 7 rays would represent the 7 seas. And the 7 rays would represent the 7 continents. She had led the American and the French revolutions, and she had appeared already, by the time this happened, on most American coins. The tablet now represented the Declaration of Independence, the American Declaration of Independence. Laboulaye called her Liberty Enlightening the World. That was the name. For all the 7 seas and all the 7 continents. And then when they finally brought her together, the cornerstone of the Statue of Liberty was laid in a Masonic ceremony by Masons, as was, by the way, the White House. The cornerstone of the White House laid by Masons in a Masonic ceremony. At the inauguration of the Statue of Liberty, the principal address was given by the Deputy Grand Master R.W. Brother Lawrence, and he said in part, and I'm going to quote him, "Massive as this statue is, its physical proportions sink into comparative obscurity when contrasted with the nobility of its concept. Liberty enlightening the world. How lofty the thought! To be free is the first, noblest aspiration of the human breast. And it is now a universally admitted truth that only in proportion as men become possessed of liberty do they become civilized, enlightened, and useful. As Masons, we cannot appropriate to ourselves alone the lessons which this monument will teach." Don't forget, they were studying in secrecy. "Not only to us, but to all men will it appeal. The gigantic figure which is here to stand in unapproachable grandeur while the centuries pass will command, be noble, and the nobleness that lies in other men sleeping but never dead will rise in majesty to meet thine own." So you see, she is a symbol of the nobleness that all people everywhere can aspire to. In 1793, by the way, backing up, so American Revolution 1776, French Revolution 1789, 1793, during the French Revolution, while it was still going on, Lady Liberty replaced Mary on many altars, including Notre Dame Cathedral. This was the new cult of reason, with the tablet of law, and she had a downward pointed sword as her guide. So that's some of the symbolism. We're going to end war, because the anti-war movement was already beginning. Anti-war, anti-slavery. Lady Liberty was anti-war, anti-slavery, and the American poet Emma Lazarus wrote a sonnet toward her. Okay, now you've all heard this sonnet, but the reason that she wrote the sonnet was to raise money. So the French were going to give liberty to the United States, right? So, but they needed to build a pedestal because they decided they want to put it, out there on Liberty Island, right? But they need a giant pedestal. She's huge. I don't have the dimensions right now, but I mean, Statue of Liberty is, you can go up in the Statue of Liberty and, it's just magnificent. And if you get there, you've got to do that. In fact, Pamela, Wiley, and I did that. We went to the Statue of Liberty and we went up in there. And it was an incredible, fabulous experience. So she wrote this sonnet to raise money to create the pedestal, the base, basically, for liberty. And the last stanza of her poem is engraved inside the pedestal's lower level. Because it's huge. You walk inside the pedestal, and, there's a labyrinth inside even the pedestal. Okay, so I want to read you her whole sonnet just so you know what it is, and you'll recognize part of it. "Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. This is our group karma. You guys are getting this, right? Okay, now, if you want to check this and make sure that my facts are true, you can do a search, Google, ISIS, Mary, Liberty, and you will see countless articles on the relationship between the three. Titled things like, is the Statue of Liberty pagan? The whore of Babylon is Isis, the Statue of Liberty. America's pagan goddess of liberty symbol. Okay, these are all the kinds of, some are really supportive, like, oh, isn't it exciting? It turns out the Statue of Liberty is Isis. Woohoo! Right there, in the New York Harbor. Okay, so just going back to this idea of immigration, Isis, Mary, and Liberty. So I shared this before, but mention it again. I picked this up. A Catholic teaching on the issue of immigration. Okay, because this is contemporary. This came up, let's see. This is recent, but not post-Trump or anything like that. But it's just about how should we handle immigration. Okay, so remember Isis, Mary, and Liberty, the mother of exiles. Okay, so here's the Catholic teaching. Basically, this is how Catholics should, how Catholics are, since a lot of you guys are Catholic, had a Catholic childhood. It's looking for how should we understand this and going to the priest. And then the priest says, oh, here's how you should understand. I've got a big story about that, but I'll tell you later. Okay, but here's how you should understand this if you're Catholic, immigration. Society's failure to obey the gospel imperative to welcome the stranger. Gospel imperative to welcome. That's a gospel imperative. Gospel's the voice of God. The imperative is welcome the stranger. That's what the Bible says. Okay, society's failure to obey the gospel imperative to welcome the stranger is manifested in numerous ways. We are implicated by politics that lead to migrant crossing deaths, that separate families, that deny protection to those fleeing violence and intense privation, that exploit people in the workforce, and that expose people to unconscionable conditions of confinement, including children. The church has been involved in the immigration issue since the birth of the nation. The church is an immigrant church that has grown through the new blood of immigrants. It has a long history of integrating immigrants into their new land. As a universal organization present in sending communities, the church has a full understanding of what compels migrants to come here. As a result, it has a lot to say about the immigration issue and enrich the public debate in this regard. So basically this goes through and quotes the Bible, time after time after time about welcoming the stranger, welcoming the stranger, welcoming the stranger, and it also talks about how we need to look at situations and definitely take into account the law, but welcoming the stranger is the major teaching that comes about. Okay, so this brings us full circle back to the Bhagavad Gita, to Bhakti Yoga, to the Tibetan altar practice of greeting the stranger. Isis, Mary, and Liberty, her name is Mother of Exiles. She calls us into our arms. She rocks us while we cry. She helps us reassemble our dismembered parts, and in turn, we conceive and we begin to create, because she is the creative principle. We, this time, we are the children. We are the children. She stands there without a child. Where is her child? We are the children. We are the children of the sun. And now we are, do you see, the sons and the daughters of America. We are the sons and the daughters of America. And I'm going to end this right there and leave us with something to think about.
Trump should know this. He missed this teaching along the way.
The minions should
Send him
know
a
this.
copy.